Okay, Unit 3, Lecture 2b, we left off different disagreement between large and small states over representation, all right, voting power in the national legislature, which will be Congress, all right, and we said under Madison's Virginia plan, the large state plan, the small states would be at the mercy of the large states. They wouldn't have enough representation, so they don't like it. So one way we have to get around or fix things when everybody's unhappy is compromise. And again, when we compromise, nobody gets what they want, so everybody's unhappy to a certain extent. So the great compromise is what we call the plan to appease everybody at the Constitutional Convention. All right, so great compromise is the Connecticut plan. No, it is both. It's written by Roger Sherman out of Connecticut, okay, why we call it the Connecticut plan. It calls for a bicameral legislature, a House of Representatives where representation will be based on population, and a Senate where every state gets 2 representatives, so equal representation. So we get something from both plans in it, and this is what we have today. Okay, so out of the convention, we get the Great Compromise, and Roger Sherman gives us our plan for the legislature that we have today. Okay, so bicameral, remember, 2 houses, House of Representatives and a Senate. Okay, and this is supposedly, so in the House of Representatives, the representatives represent us, the people. We elect them. The Senate is supposed to represent the states, and it used to be because state legislatures used to appoint Senate. Now with the 17th Amendment, we directly elect senators, and that changes it. So we're going to talk about that later because that's an amendment that comes up every now and then. All right, another argument that's going to arise at the convention is between North and South, the states arguing about slavery. Not the legality of it, but now we have a House of Representatives where representation is based on population. If you remember, we talked earlier, the North's population and the West population is going to continue to grow, and fairly rapidly, because there's opportunity. The South is a plantation, cash crop economy, limited opportunity, limited growth, so it's very important for the South to try and maintain some sort of fair balance in representation in the House, because they're worried about laws about regarding slavery, because a lot of northern states are going to get rid of it almost immediately after the Revolution. All right, so if we're going to have representation based on population, do we count slaves for representation? South says sure. North goes, well, we don't really think so. That doesn't seem right because slaves don't get to vote. You call them property, so why should we allow you to count them for representation? But maybe we should count them for taxation. And South's like, oh, no, don't count them for taxation purposes. So we end up with another compromise. The 3/5 compromise. Every 5 slaves counts as 3 people when we're counting for population, which we do every 10 years in a census, right? By constitutional law, the Constitution says we must have a census every 10 years. All right, so 5 slaves equal 3 people when we're counting for representation and taxation. All right, so that kind of resolves it for a while. We'll see the issue of slavery come up quite a bit, especially when the South loses the House and they're trying to maintain balances in the Senate. Okay, the next argument they're going to have, and the worst disagreement that they'll argue over, is the power of the central government itself. And Madison's going to address this with separation of powers. Okay, we're going to create a government where we have 3 branches of government. Okay, and it was included in the Virginia plan. So separation of powers divides the powers and responsibilities of the different types of powers and responsibilities between branches, and it also limits the power of the branches so that no one branch gets too powerful and seizes all. So the legislative branch, or Congress, makes the law. All right, they'll be responsible for that. The judicial branch interprets the law, especially when we get to John Marshall, who we'll talk about in a little bit. And the executive branch then enforces the law, and we have a system of checks and balances to keep each one in line. All right, an example of a check or a stop would be a presidential veto. Okay, and finally, the founders limited the federal government's power to those specifically given to it, though this is very vague, and we'll talk about that later with implied powers. Okay, I'm going to have to continue Unit 3, Lecture